They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
I love America. I love the Constitution. I love the First Amendment. I want to carry and all guns. I love property. And let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 lessons of the Austrian Economic School, motherfuckers.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white.
My next guest is somebody I always enjoy talking to. Like the Spotted Owl, he's a good lawyer who fights for the principles of the Enlightenment, the principles of our nation. He's a senior legal fellow and the manager of the Supreme Court and Appellate Court advocacy programs in the Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Zack Smith, how are you, handsome?
I'm doing well, Shaun. Thanks for having me on the show tonight.
Well, you wrote a very interesting article, and the article is about Election Day, or as it's known in Democrat areas, Selection Day. And I'm curious to know how you view this. There's some big cases right now before the Supreme Court, but I'm curious to know how you view this. And I say this to you because I think that the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers are some of the most interesting documents we have to link the mindset of America. And I have to tell you, I grew up big part of the time as an Anti-Federalist. Sometimes I'm glad the Federalists won, sometimes I'm sad they didn't, or that the Anti-Federalists didn't. This is a big and important issue, and I'm wondering how you see it playing out.
Yeah, so this is a crucial issue, and it's a crucial issue because many states, including Mississippi, have accepted and counted ballots received after Election Day. In Mississippi, the rule is someone can mail and send in a ballot, and it will be received and counted up to 5 days after Election Day. Now, here's the problem with that, Shaun. Congress has stepped in. They've passed a federal statute setting the Tuesday after the first Monday in November as the federal election day. And so essentially what the RNC, a couple of other plaintiffs are arguing is that by accepting and counting those ballots after that congressionally mandated election day, that violates those federal statutes.
And the reality is, the federal government, although we have a system where state governments can set a lot of the parameters, the federal government does have the oversight to change that, especially in these areas, because you're talking about a state where it's 5 days. In Illinois, they wanted 2 weeks. So Illinois is even worse. And once the states become controlled by a single corrupt party, they really need the federal government to change the fact that the government itself has been corrupted. And when we speak of Illinois, I think it's a better example than the one you gave for this reason. We have a gangster who was an alderman in charge of finance for 50 years. He just got out. He just went to prison. I think he's out already. And his name is Ed Burke. His wife was the chief Supreme Court justice on the Illinois Supreme Court. So once the states become that corrupted, you need the federal government to correct those wrongs, don't you?
Well, look, Shaun, the Constitution gives states, and particularly state legislatures, the primary authority to set election rules and procedures. But the Constitution is also very clear that Congress can step in and set nationwide rules in certain circumstances. And where Congress has exercised that authority, the congressional determination has to be followed. And so, unfortunately, what you're seeing, to your point, often in blue states, but not always, but often in blue states, are very liberal efforts to circumvent those rules and procedures that are often designed to put in place common sense election integrity measures. That's part of the reason I think you're seeing such pushback against things like the SAVE Act, which would allow Congress to exercise certain common sense procedures that would help safeguard our electoral processes.
One of the questions that, it just gnaws at me. It truly does, and I'm asked it by a lot of callers. I think this is something where I can't explain it. I have still been unable to understand how states can nullify federal immigration laws. Now, I don't care if they call them sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. The reality is these individuals and a very small fraction of the population, be they elected or not, is irrelevant to me, have determined that they will ignore a very important law. Now, the reason that they do it is very simple to me, because I'm from the homeland of Cloward and Piven. They are trying to overwhelm the system and steal elections. There is no other reason. And yet, this has been in practice for decades. In the very first case, why didn't the federal government immediately sue and prosecute the very people who would nullify immigration laws, of which we have many pathways to be a citizen? Why in the world did they tolerate this for this long?
Well, look, Shaun, as a policy matter, every state, every local government should help enforce federal immigration law. Now, in terms of what the federal government can require the states to do, there's a line of cases that say essentially the federal government cannot commandeer state and local officials to enforce federal laws if those state and local officials don't want to. And that's primarily what these so-called sanctuary cities are relying on. Now, two quick points are in order. The first is what often has happened is that the federal government will give a lot of money to state and local governments, and they'll attach certain conditions to that money. And so what you've seen President Trump and the Trump administration saying is if you are not going to fulfill really your civic duty of helping to enforce federal immigration law, then we're going to take away some of that money that was allocated that you're supposed to use to help fulfill those purposes. The other thing I would say, the second point I would make, is that even though state officials may not have an obligation constitutionally to affirmatively help enforce federal immigration law, what they cannot do, and what many state officials have come close to doing, or in some instances have stepped over the line into doing, is they cannot actively obstruct federal law enforcement officials from enforcing federal immigration law. And so I think that's something that you may also see a tougher crackdown on going forward. And you've already seen some prosecutions of local judges, others who have crossed that line into actively obstructing federal law enforcement.
I'm going to ask your opinion, because I value it so much, on what is happening in the state of Minnesota, which is so completely corrupted in the judicial arena.
Shaun, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Yep. I'm going to take advantage of having you on, and I'm going to ask you an opinion of what has been insane to me. There are 3 different female judges, now a 4th female judge in Minnesota, that has let Somalian admitted criminals who have admitted or been found guilty by a jury, and judges have overturned the jury verdict in 3 different cases, and they just let somebody who pled guilty walk. When the judicial arena becomes this corrupted, what can the federal government do to change this? Because they are getting away with stealing money that I believe the policies itself were created so that the money could be stolen. And I hate the idea that they're getting away with this, but they are.
Well, I would say stay tuned, Shaun. I think you're seeing a focus by the Trump administration to combat fraud. You just saw a new assistant attorney general sworn in, specifically designed to help combat fraud. The vice president, several other federal officials are focusing on this issue. And so the Trump administration has made clear combating systemic fraud is going to be a major push, a major focus of the Justice Department going forward, whoever runs it. The second thing I would say is, look, whenever you have judges failing to do their duties, failing to follow the law, state officials have to take action and hold them accountable under state law. And so Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida has done that in several instances. You're seeing calls right now, again, in my home state of Florida, to impeach a local trial court judge who released a violent offender, released that individual back into the public, who unfortunately went on to harm other individuals, children, in fact. And so, look, there are mechanisms available. Political leaders just have to have the will and the ability to follow through and hold those individuals accountable.
One of the things I have a question of in Illinois, for instance, this is a big problem when it comes to the bankruptcy of the state and the bankruptcy of so many other states. And that is that the politicians indemnify ridiculous agreements for government workers. So they create a law. And that law says at no time can pensioners, people who retire or work for the government, can they ever be affected by a return on investment or by villages and counties and cities and states not contributing what the allotted agreement was to their pension. So in essence, they don't contribute, they never contribute, and when they need money, they raise taxes. How in the world in America could government create a law that enslaves the non-government workers to government workers. Don't you think this should be challenged?
Well, look, fiscal irresponsibility in deep blue states like Illinois, like cities like Chicago, Cook County, unfortunately, as you know, Shaun, that's nothing new. Now, I think certainly you are seeing pushback to some of those tax and spend regimes. Unfortunately, that tax and spend pushback has primarily been coming from red states. Once again, my home state of Florida, who's been very good at combating wasteful, fraudulent spending at the local level. But you are seeing some challenges, federal lawsuits being brought against some state and local governments that are exceeding their taxing authority, that are committing really takings under the Fifth Amendment. And I suspect you'll see more of that as these efforts to extract tax money from taxpayers really exceeds in unprecedented ways.
Zack Smith, I so appreciate you and everybody at Heritage for always making time. I know how busy you are. Thank you for joining me on a very busy day for you. I really appreciate you making time, Zack. Talk to you soon.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me on, Shaun. Take care.
Thank you. We'll be back with your calls and comments.
This is the Shaun Thompson Show, where Democrats are always wrong, Republicans are seldom right, and politicians are never, ever to be trusted. On AM 560, The Answer.
Oh, okay. So you just want me to get Progressive Auto Insurance because their collision coverage covers up to $1,000 in vet bills if you're injured in an accident? That's it?